You find weapon elitism in Splatoon a major problem? I mean, if you ask a competitive player about a tier list or like what weapons are being used right now, you're gonna get some very frank, blunt answers. I wouldn't call those people elitists, because part of what those players are trying to do is make it so that if you're interested in competitive play, you're not picking up a playstyle that is going to fall off and have to just completely relearn the game over a period of time as a result of that weapon choice. They don't want you to... They just don't want you to, like, waste time or, like, disadvantage yourself for no reason. They want you to pick something that you're going to see significant value out of at every level of play, and not mire yourself in trying to figure out, you know, how far you can push the Clash Blaster, or something like that. But I will say that I think that we are very quick to dismiss a weapon, and that it's far more likely that a weapon surprises someone with how good it is than that it surprises someone with how bad it is. Like, there are use cases where you can have significant impacts with even weaker weapons. And failing to recognize that is something that I think the competitive community has on occasion done. Now, there is a good point in that if you're trying to get on a competitive team and play at a relatively high level, those niche use cases are not going to be on every map mode, and when you switch map modes, you know, they're not going to want to bring you on just so that you can play the Explo on specifically Umami Ruins, and then have another player who plays on everything else. They're going to want someone who they can field on every single map mode, so they can start getting used to you and know how you play. So, weapons that are consistently viable on a variety of different situations, those are the weapons that you're going to see at the highest level of play. It's not just a matter of, is this good? It's, is this good here and elsewhere? Is this good in a variety of different situations that you are likely to come up against in tournament play? So even if a weapon isn't the best choice for a map, if it's good in a larger variety of places than the best choice, it's going to get picked over the best choice, except by one trace. As far as the mindset around it, like, there are definitely some, you know, stances on weapons that end up hurting players in the long run, and I would say it's more hurtful to the people who, you know, are closed-minded than it is to the players that they share their opinions with. Because it's going to make it so that those players have a... This is a stupid thing I'm doing. It's going to make it so that those players have an incomplete understanding of the game that can be taken advantage of by people who know how to play those weapons. And, you know, if you dismiss something as a low tier for too long and never remind yourself of, like, what its weaknesses actually are and how to punish them, then you can get yourself into some trouble and get beaten by some stuff that shouldn't work on paper. But at the same time, like, if you listen to someone who says, oh, you shouldn't play that, it's bad, and you don't ask why it's bad, you don't, you know, interrogate that question, you don't see if it fits into your playstyle anyway, then I would say that's on you, and not on the person who told you, don't play that, it's bad. There are going to be people who have bad opinions. There are going to be people who are closed-minded about things. That's not something that you can, you know, prevent. But you can protect yourself from those people by interrogating their opinions and getting them to clarify things, instead of speaking in generalities. I'm shooting into this Booyah Bomb here. I don't want anyone to be able to get close. There, we found them. They just keep running power clams out the right side, and we really are not doing a lot to stop it. But I guess they're not doing a lot to stop us from scoring when we go in. It's been a goofy kind of solo queue sort of game there. There we go. I will say, I do think that there are some weapons where if you are interested in winning at a competitive level, it is just very confusing why someone would want to choose them. Like, I don't get why someone would think, if your goal is winning specifically, because that's an important, distinguishing factor here. If your goal is just to push a weapon as far as it can go, cool, play it, right? Like, if your team is willing to let you run it, then run it. If you just only like the game while you're playing that weapon, that's cool, run it. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we talk about competitive play, the word competitive means your goal is to win the game. And if your goal is to win the game, and that's the only factor that we care about, there are objectively just some weapons that are going to win more often than others. And it's because of characteristics of the weapons and not because of a popularity contest about who plays those weapons. Like, there's a reason I make tier lists. Like, sure, they're an imperfect method of analyzing the game. Like, I'm not going to tell you that, like, a tier list is absolute fact and that anything lower than this tier will never win ever. Just, if you're looking for a weapon choice that you could put your time into, and what you want out of that weapon choice is games that you're going to win, you're going to want to pick from the upper echelons first, The other weapons should be kind of, like, if you're going to use them, you want to be thinking, what am I getting out of this that this other option that we know is really good doesn't give me? There's got to be some niche for it. There's got to be some reason to. Because, like, I don't see why someone would want to run, say, a gold arrow spray when you could run a sloshing machine. Or if you're trying to play, an aggressive play style, when you could run a splash-o-matic. Or a 52 or something like that. The advantages just don't outweigh the disadvantages for that weapon. When compared with other kits that are in the game, you're just less likely to win by picking it. You can even look at this with, like, ranking numbers. Like, you look at a top player when they decide, I'm going to just, pick this weapon and grind it, even though I, know it's not a great weapon. Like, Kiver did this with the Silver Arrow Spray in Splatoon 2. 2,800, 2,900 kind of player in Splatoon 2, and when he picked up the Silver Arrow Spray, he was just short of 2,600. And then he spent, like, I think it was a full month, like, trying to push that as far as he could go with it. Just, it wasn't able to carry him as high as the other weapons were. And it's not just a familiarity thing, because he's already familiar with all sorts of shooters. He's switched from Splash to Shot to Pro, which is way more different than any of the other ones are, and then he switched on to Arrow Spray, and that was how well he did. There are definitely weapons that have weaknesses that do not outweigh the strengths of other weapons. Because, like, if I were to tell, let's say, SBPC, who was on the call earlier, that I was deciding to pick up Undercover Umbrella, I wouldn't expect that he'd be like, you're dumb and bad, what a casual, what a filthy casual. He's not going to say that. What he's going to do is he's going to be like, why? Why not? Because it doesn't win as often. That would be the answer to that question. Because as a competitive player and an analyst who studies competitive play and tries to understand what's going to be strong in the metagame, he's looking at that like, I don't see a reason why you as a competitive player, someone who I know wants to win games, would want to pick that weapon. That's the response that I really expect to get out of him. And that I completely understand, and I don't think that needs to be read as an attack on someone's character. Because, like, if I were, purely focused on trying to win the game, and the conclusion that I come to there is the Undercover Umbrella, then he's going to look at me and be like, really? Is this the analyst that we've been listening to for so long? It might sound harsh, but like I would be completely understanding of that sort of sentiment there. So what he would want to hear from me is, here are the personal reasons that I have for wanting to run it. Or, you know, I just think it's fun. Or, I think it could actually get pushed in these particular situations. And then he would question me about those. And if I had an answer to the question why, then I know that he would, you know, sit and listen to me about that. You know, he would hear me out. He might disagree. He would almost certainly disagree. And I would disagree if someone were to try to say the same thing to me. But, again, I don't think that's an uncivil conversation. I don't think he's, like, attacking, you know, my intelligence or something. Like, because he's not jumping straight to, you're stupid for thinking this. He's like, what is it that I have not considered that would lead you to this conclusion of all things? There are, you know, reasons that people have run undercover in the past. The Kensa Undercover Umbrella was a very good torpedo spammer and armor tank. It would just, like, keep on giving you armors, and it would spam this really broken sub-weapon. You know, when it came out, it was really broken. Like, people have run undercover, just not this undercover. And when, you know, it's so a weapon is so universally unused in competitive play, when nobody is trying to push it, you can probably assume it's a stinker. There's someone out there, out of the thousands and thousands of people who play this game, even at a competitive level, you know, even though that narrows it a lot. There are enough people playing this game that if that weapon was sleeper really good on some map modes or something, that someone would actually be trying to make it work in tournament play, and you're just not seeing that right now. Another thing that I think is a dynamic that comes up with those kinds of situations is that sometimes if somebody decides that they're going to stick with the weapon even though they know that it's not the best choice, like, I could see it being a fun goal for themselves to just try and be the best undercover player. You know, it's not as difficult as being the best splash player, but it's still a really hard thing to do. So maybe that's, you know, an idea that someone has in their head that they want to go for. And I can totally understand that being a really interesting thing to try and push in solo queue, because then you get to see how this really low-tier weapon should get played, and maybe learn something about the game that way. Maybe there's a tactic that you can carry over, or maybe it teaches you something about how the game works, seeing how it has to play in order to accommodate for its limitations. There are some worthwhile reasons to run those lower-tier weapons, but sometimes what happens instead is you'll get a more casual player, someone who is has convinced themselves that what they want is to win the game. And they don't really have their priorities in order. They don't really understand their own goals. And they tell themselves, well, if the undercover is what I'm best with. You know, it fits my play style better. And so even though everyone's saying that it's low tier, you know, it's definitely what's best for me. When, if they were to pick up something else that's similar for some other reason, that they would probably see improvement pretty quickly in what they're capable of doing. And it's when people have mindsets like this that are very clearly limiting themselves, that's when competitive players get frustrated first trying to help said players. You know, they'll look at this and they'll be like, okay, dude, this is not something that fits your play style. You don't want to change weapons. You have this unwillingness to adapt to the way that the game actually is. You have a way that you want the game to play, and you're trying to play to that instead of playing to the way the game actually is. Like, wake up, dude. And in having trouble dealing with people who have that mindset, that lack of humility, is what it boils down to. Competitive players get frustrated, get the idea in their heads, man, I guess there's really no helping these people sometimes. And when you run into a situation where there's not much you can do about it, the thing that humans do is decide to laugh at it. When people get upset, you know, at people's political opinions, you just throw up your hands and they're like, well, I guess that political party's just a bunch of idiots, and we're gonna laugh at how dumb they are. That's like what a lot of political shows are nowadays. Like, you look at someone like John Oliver or Ben Shapiro, those guys exist to make fun of the other side's, political views. And that's the way that a lot of discourse breaks down. Just someone gets frustrated feeling like they're not being heard, feeling like the other side doesn't understand their perspective, feeling like there's no more dialogue to be had. And when we run into a situation where there's nothing else we can do but laugh, we decide to laugh. It's kind of what competitive players are running up against, where they get, mad, angry, frustrated. They love this game. They want people to enjoy it on the level that they've been able to. And someone comes in with a mindset that they just can't square with, they can't deal with, they're frustrated by, they wish that people were, more resilient. They wish that people were smarter. They wish that people were better. And they feel like a non-humble mindset, something where people are deluding themselves about what their actual goals are. They look at that and they're like, well, there's nothing I can do. Might as well at least make fun of them. And so you see that a lot, especially with higher level competitive players, because the Splatoon Reddits have not been friendly to competitive play. The very public places where you find a lot of Splatoon artists, people who are really into the idols, the lore, and don't play the game anywhere near as seriously as the actual competitive scene does. And that's not to say that there aren't competitive players who are into those aspects of the game. But when that's the only point of reference that people have, the only thing that people are interested in, when maybe this is a game that people have played casually and have never played a game competitively, and so they come in without the strict competitive mindset, the humble, ready to learn, ready to adapt kind of mindset that it takes to play the game competitively, that can rub a lot of people in the competitive scene the wrong way. So I don't want to just label, talking about tier lists and stuff as weapon elitism, because I think that mindset doesn't adequately address the people who are bugging you as human beings. Because they have their reasons for feeling the way that they do about tier lists. They're responding to an ongoing conversation that you may not have been aware of, that you may not have been a part of, in how, weapons should be chosen. And they've been a part of this conversation for a long time. They've heard a lot of bad takes, and they're sick of the bad takes. And they have less and less and less patience for dealing with those bad takes as time goes on. And so even if they misdiagnose you as having one of those takes, they might respond negatively as a result of that. So hopefully that helped raise some degree of empathy for how those kinds of conversations tend to go down. Because I definitely sympathize with both sides there. It's very annoying to have, the choice of weapon that you really enjoy gatekept by someone. That's obnoxious and can be very mean-spirited sometimes. A lot of the time, a competitive player will use their knowledge of the tier list as a bludgeon against someone, being like, oh, well, I know that this weapon's bad, so, look at how smart I am, because that's obnoxious. But it's also obnoxious for the competitive player when a casual player will be like, this weapon's the best because it fits my playstyle, and you try to gently tell them, okay, I get where you're coming from there, but it's just not going to do as well. Even if you switch up your playstyle completely, you're still going to have better results than you are with that weapon. Trust me, I've been there, I've tried to make it work, it's just not there for you, buddy. And when they respond negatively to that, when you're trying to, let them know what's in their best interest, when you're trying to give them tough love and tell them, hey, I don't think that you're really being honest with yourself, and they don't listen, it's like, well, why did I even try in the first place?